People power growth, but recruiting and onboarding are expensive, exhausting, and absolutely overwhelming. I've been there, and it doesn't have to be this way. Welcome to Hire and Empower. I'm your host, Molly McGrath. Join me as we interview leaders who care about their teams and distill powerful lessons from them. This show is sponsored by H&E, helping organizations to find their best hire and empower them for success. Learn more at hiringandempowering.com. All right, guys, it's that time of the year where we're all talking about, we have clean blank slate and we have money in the bank and we have money to spend. We now have a marketing budget. We have all this stuff. We're marketing, and our closing rate is in the freaking toilet. And so it is Q1. We are fixing this right now. So many firms I talk to, they are so confused about a lead, a PNC, intake, conversions. It makes you want to smash your head against the wall sometimes, unless you're consistently, persistently looking at your dashboard, your KPIs, your numbers every single week. So how many of you know your true closing rate? There's so often people will say to me, I'm like, what's your closing rate? Oh God, it's close to 90%. Really? Okay. Let's start pulling some data out of your CRM. And the average that I see in law firms is 48.7%. It consistently, maybe high 50s if it's the founder, if it's a guru, if it's a talking head, what have you. And when we really start looking at this week after week, it's fascinating. So how many of you today, we're not messing around. We're going for it. We're talking about it, and we're going right to talk about sales, period. It's not a dirty word. And we're having the conversation about how to consistently have a structure to consistently close between 60 to 80%. For some of you, that's a game changer. For many of you, it's a game changer. So I'm so excited. I'm just going to tell you, I stumbled upon Richard James. I've heard about him for years and years, like his programs, his methods, his coaching. And finally, a mutual friend of ours connected us right before Christmas. We hopped in a Zoom room and we're like, oh my God, like we're kindred spirits. And he started talking to me about a new initiative that he's very passionate about. And we have his founder here, Michael Strauch. Did I say it right?
Yeah, just about. Michael Strauch, you got it.
Thank you. All right, so Michael's here, the founder, creator, passionate trainer around the closing room. Let's call it what it is. The closing room. I love it because when I heard that first, I'm like, gosh, it's no secret that when you see the Academy Awards and what have you, when that show, The Closer, just winning award after award after award. If you've never seen it, it's amazing. But Michael's here to share with us about tips, tricks, techniques around getting very serious about your numbers this year. You all tell me that's what you want. You're all flying around the country, investing in trainings for dragons, non-attorney salespeople, yada, 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 yada. But you know where your baseline is. You know where you start. When people call me for hiring a non-attorney salesperson, I'm like, all right, great. What's the benchmark? Where are they at right now? What do you want them to be closing at? They're like 80%. I'm like, where are you closing at right now? They're like, 2%. So we have to have a system and a structure. So Michael, talk to us about the closing room and what really sparked this for you to just really birth this thing.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for the opportunity to be on today. I appreciate it, Molly. Really looking forward to packing some value into this conversation. So the closing room was born out of an opportunity. So I've been an entrepreneur basically out of the womb, I like to say. I've always done something entrepreneurial, and through all of my endeavors, one thing reigned true, and that was I loved sales. Every business I did when I was younger, I would go door to door and sell anything I could, literally, whether it was.
Did you sell Cutco Nice?
No, so I was too young to do Cutco. At that time, yeah, that gives you some perspective. I was like a little round 12-year-old going door to door, knocking on doors. And so I didn't sell Cutco, but I loved to sell. And then I built a web development business off of the back of YouTube. Some of you may be familiar with Wix. I became Wix's global influencer. And so I yes, little side note.
I
But
didn't know that. That's awesome.
thank you. Thank you. I did. And then I built what was called Wix Training Academy and taught people how to use Wix. And through that, I was able to generate leads purely from YouTube and build a web development company. And what I quickly discovered is I loved selling web development projects. I didn't as much love the actual design and development, which is where I had help and team that would assist in that. But I loved that process. I finally saw an opportunity to kind of transition out of that business because, as I mentioned, design and development just was not my ultimate end all be all. And an opportunity came up to take this sales structure that I had learned and built out and implement it into a law firm. And so I decided to run with it. So I went into it was a bankruptcy law firm out of Towson, Maryland. And I got into the firm and they said, we'll give you 90 days. You got 90 days to prove that this structure you have can outperform ours. And when I got there, that firm was closing at about 50% of their qualified leads into paying clients. And at the end of 90 days, mind you, this was all during COVID. So this was 100% remote consultations. They were closing at 84% with the structure. And so that jumped.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. I was thrilled. They were thrilled. It sparked a lot of excitement. And that led me as an opportunity to launch into the closing room, where now we exclusively do this for law firms. And that firm became just an advocate of ours. So it's been a fun journey so far.
So if I hear you right, you're saying in 90 days, you could get the system and the structure implemented and working in furnishing results.
Absolutely. I would tell you, you can do it in 30 days.
Wow. Any area of law?
All areas of law. So this has been battle tested now just across about 12 plus practice areas.
Wow, fantastic. So when you talk about a sales structure, tell us a little bit, you don't have to give away all the secret sauce. And I know you have a gift for our listeners at the end to actually see, touch, feel, and experience this through your training. So, but tell us, like, what is something that you feel like that people need to really be paying attention to in regards to this, other than just pulling data and being totally depressed by the numbers?
Yeah, a little aside there too. I liked how you introduced the average close rate you see with law firms. We too do that exercise. From the firms that work with us, the average close rate at start was 33.7%. And so, yeah, so it's interesting. But when it comes to what you have to pay attention to in a consultation, first and foremost, I know we've been throwing this word around, but actually having a structure. I don't mean just something that you just kind of keep in your head. I mean, written down a step-by-step structure that you use religiously on every consultation every single time. And when it comes to building that structure, there's obviously key components along the way, right? So you build it out. We've got our structure that we use that's been proven. And when it comes to it, you've got to architect the key points of a consultation, right? You've got to learn more about the prospect situation, what they're going through. You got to successfully transition that into kind of what it looks like to work with your firm. And then, of course, you've got a close. You got to work through actually closing the deal and actually being willing to ask for the order, right? So those are very broad spectrum strokes in terms of what a structure looks like, but you've got to have it written down. It's got to be repeatable, and it can't be solely reliant on one person. You should be able to take anyone in your firm on your team and be able to plug this into their plug them into this structure with proper training, of course, and they should be up and running, ready to rock and roll.
So these 11 firms and growing, that you've gone into, what are some of the things, I'm hearing number one, structure. Like people believe I say, well, talk to me about your sales process, your intake process. People use different terms, what have you, but they'll say, oh, we have a system, when basically all they have is an intake sheet, name, birthday, all the garbage necessary, but all of the logistical things, and they're calling that a sales structure, or they're calling that an intake structure, right?
Sure.
What did you see? Like, what were some of where you walked in and you're like the nutty professor and you're rubbing your hands and you're like, oh, I already know I'm on firm number 6, 7, 8. I already know what the first things that I'm going to make this 2 millimeter shift in.
Yes, I'll give you one of the biggest ones. So after working, I think we're now north of working with maybe 45, 50 firms over the last 2 years.
Wow.
One thing became abundantly clear for the attorneys that were still running their own consultations. Okay. And now one shift is this. So often I listen to a consultation be pre-structured, right? And a lot of times attorneys use legal advice to try to close the deal. Okay. Now, here's what we believe. We're not suggesting that legal advice should go out the window. We're suggesting we should move the line in which we give legal advice. So the goal of the initial consultation is to get the prospect to retain the firm so that we can solve their problem and provide them legal advice. Just from making that little carburetor adjustment alone makes a big difference in a lot of firms, because when we start going into legal advice, it opens up Pandora's box in the consult room. Right now, you've got a bunch of questions. Now it's hard to ever get back to a close or a structure. You're just tackling legal questions. And now they got free services and you didn't get a client, and you just walk out of the consult room frustrated, wondering why you didn't close the deal. Right.
And then you call marketing and you're like, you sent me an unqualified lead.
That's my favorite. Right.
Or you're yelling at your receptionist, you put unqualified people on my calendar and
Yep.
take up all my time. I hear it all the time. I love that you said that, because I always say a confused mind says no. They do
100%.
nothing, right?
Absolutely. I live by that motto. I train that week in and week out.
Yeah. So listen, attorneys, I can't tell you how many like throwing knuckles, fisticuff fights I get in with attorneys that say, no way, Jose, I cannot get out of that conference room. I'm sure that was the big challenge. If you're listening to their consultations, what have you, to get the attorney to shift into not giving legal advice. I bet that was a struggle and a half.
It is, but here's what it boils down to. And you'll hear me say this a million times. If you have the right structure in place, you never have to give legal advice. Right?
Wow.
If you have the right structure in place, legal advice isn't necessary, and you can still close between 60 to 80%. Imagine that for the attorneys listening. You don't have to give legal advice, and you can still close at 60 to 80%. It's all about the structure you've got in place.
Yeah. So when they do, so what I hear you saying is just you really train people on how to control the narrative, so there's not even an opening or a space to guide them to ask a legal question, right?
Right. Like, look, you part of sales is you've got to empathize with the prospect, right? So you still have to leave time and opening to let them share their story about what's going on. But from that point, you have to architect a process in which, you're guiding them along this straight line path that ultimately leads to them retaining the firm without having to dive into legal advice.
Wow. Okay. So you're seeing the lack of structure. It's not human dependent. It doesn't have the brain surgeon model that I need. The guru on the, billboard on the side of the highway every single time, what have you. Let me ask you a question. This just came up for me, what I hear all the time from people, because you say with the structure, by and large, anybody could come in and plug and play. Do you think that somebody has to have previous sales experience to be able to follow the structure?
Here's what I could say. Is previous sales experience required to follow the structure? No, it's not. But someone with previous sales experience that's okay with rejection and comfortable with overcoming objections is going to way outperform. And I would tell you that that's the person that should be in that role, right? Because no matter what sales process you follow, you are still going to have objections you have to overcome. And if we're not comfortable with that, makes it really, really difficult to actually be successful in closing deals.
Can you, in your experience, can you train people that are coachable, right? And that have, can you train people to really embrace rejection?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. Don't get me wrong, there's some innate like feelings and emotions people have naturally, right? But it can be trained. You could become a little bit more you could be more comfortable with it overall, as long as you've got the proper training in place.
Just stay in action, get 5 or 10 rejections under your belt, and then eventually you'll kind of be desensitized from it.
Yeah, I mean, look, no one ever loves rejection, but you become desensitized to it. It's okay, thank you, on to the next opportunity, right? It's just, that's one no closer to a yes.
Okay, great. So I love it. Structure is not a checklist, guys. That's what I'm hearing from you. I'm sure you go in there and they're like, oh yeah, we have a system, we have a structure, and they hand up the one intake form or what have you. So I'm hearing you like from start to finish, from cradle to grave throughout the entire process, right?
Yeah. From the moment they walk in the initial consultation to the moment they are handed off into whatever the next step looks like in fulfillment. Yep. There's got to be a process in place for that. And no, it's not just an intake form with some initial personal information. It's an actual sales process that we need in place.
Okay, great. What else did you see when you went into this firms? What else is really making the closing room produce these types of numbers?
So it does fall in line with the idea of a structure, but this is more of a mindset shift, and it's twofold. First, what I often found is because most firms didn't have a structure, they were customizing each consultation to each.
Always.
Always, right? So it was like a custom solution each time. Worse over, I've heard from many of them that this is what they've been told to do from other sales trainers in the industry. And so here's the problem with that. When we're trying to customize each initial consultation to each prospect, indirectly, what we're trying to do is trying to close 100% of the prospects. When in reality, some weeks you might close 80%. Other weeks you might close 20%. And the problem is there's no consistency in that. And if you don't have consistency and dependability in your sales process in your firm, that puts you in a very, very difficult position as a law firm owner, because you can't depend on, oh, I'm going to close 60 to 80% this week, right? You're constantly hoping that this is one of the 80% weeks. And it's just not a good position to be in, where we take a different approach and say, no, we should pass every consultation through the same black box structure every single time. And depending on your practice area, close between 60 and 80% week in and week out.
Yeah. Did you see this? This is what I hear. It makes me crazy, but I hear from a lot of firms when they will be in the conference room and then the client leaves without signing on the dotted line because they're going to turn the engagement agreement into a Picasso.
Yep. You're losing the deal right there. I mean, you are literally writing the deal away in that moment.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is it is black and white. It is duplicatable. And you, at that end of that meeting, nobody's walking away with, let me think about it. They're signing on the dotted line or they are not.
They are either putting their down payment down and signing, or they're not. If they're not, we've obviously got to follow up with them. But I could tell you from experience, if we don't convert at the highest rate during the initial consultation, the show rate of follow-ups already isn't all that high. And then once they do follow up, either they're still thinking about it. It's just the conversion rate's not that high. So if you don't close the deal in the initial consultation, don't hear this wrong. You need to do follow up, but it's almost a goodbye deal, if you will, if you don't get it closed in the consultation.
It is. I always say that, like, the phone will make you rich and follow up, but then that's a whole nother system in regards to follow up. But you have to remember, when somebody leaves, they are getting, again, a confused mind says, no, they're going to their friends or neighbor, the pastor, whoever it is, person at church to get their information. And then think about how hard your team has to work to do the follow-up, especially you're totally hosed if you're leaning on just automation too. A lot of people are like, yeah, we do follow-up. We send, it's in our Lawmatics and there's a whole automated system. I'm like, that is not follow-up.
No, it is not.
Yeah, especially in this day and age since COVID, right?
Right.
Whenever my phone rings, I like jolt. I'm like, oh my God, like someone's calling me. I want to pick up the phone. Nobody calls anymore. You're getting spammed with texts and email and what have you. But by and large, when somebody calls you, it's refreshing.
Yeah, it is. People like that personal touch again.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So I love that. So attorneys listening, hey, my team members that are listening, and my law firm admin boot camp, and I think, Michael, I'm going to bring you in there to come train, because I would love for you, because this is what the team members tell me. They're like, oh my God, when they walk out of the conference room, they're constantly, now I got to follow up with the client to book their next appointment. Can I just come into the conference room like Vanna White or like, the cruise director and walk in and just handle? But then they'll give it to the team member and say, okay, draft the engagement agreement. And they're like, oh my God, like what? This is highly inefficient.
Yeah.
And not only that, but then you're panicking because you can't cover payroll.
Right.
So I love that. I'm going to bring you in to help, because my team members that are listening, share this with your attorney. And it's really hard for me to get some firms to stop turning the engagement agreement into this masterpiece, after which nobody cares. They're not reading it.
No, I get it. Listen, I understand your attorneys, your lawyers, you need it in writing, totally on the same page, but don't let that prohibit you from closing the deal in the consult. Yes, they will sign it. They need to sign it, but it doesn't need to be a large work of art. It needs to get the job done and say what it needs to say to make sure you're legally protected from both parties.
All right, attorneys that want to argue with us about this, here's a little homework assignment for you. The three past contracts that you sign, maybe it's for Facebook ads person, a marketing company, someone do your hardwood floors, don't care. I want you to really close your eyes and be able to recite it word for word what it said. You can, because when you guys sign my contracts, and then you ask me about the refund policy or the redo policy or what have you. I'm like, it's in the contract. And I hear from, I didn't read it. They didn't read it. So, we all know that we're not, we're paying attention, of course. And if you're doing a good job in the closing room, you're highlighting the process, which the process is probably a big portion of the contract, right? What I expect from you, what you expect from me, what it's going to cost, the ripcord provisions, all that stuff. That's it. Nobody wants a 17-page engagement agreement.
No.
Right?
Right.
All right. What else? Tell us what else. I'm so excited that you're on board with this. I'm not kidding. I'm bringing you into my law firm admin boot camp to talk to my client service coordinators and my paralegals who are banging their heads against the wall because attorneys will not close.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I certainly do. It's frustrating, right? It can be frustrating from a staff perspective. You had mentioned something earlier on, and I know it was mentioned jokingly, which is, the attorney or whoever's in the consult room getting frustrated that they're getting poor quality leads,
Yes.
right?
Talk about that.
Well, first and foremost, I would say in most cases, it's not poor quality leads. Putting it bluntly, it's your lack of ability to close in the consult room. It's usually not the leads. Don't get me wrong, there's non-qualified leads, of course. But what I also hear on that note is when we're not closing enough clients and we want to grow the business, I hear everybody say, oh, just go spend more money on marketing and advertising, generate more leads. You're gonna close more business. In practicality, that's true. In theory, that's wrong. And the reason that's wrong is because if we go spend more money on marketing and advertising, all we're going to do is speed up the pace at which we burn more money on marketing and advertising. Because let's take a firm that's closing at 33.7%, the average we find when they come to us. And they go spend more money on marketing and advertising. Great. They generated all these new leads, but you're still closing at 33.7%. So if we fix our close rate first and go from 33.7% to, I could tell you could go as high as 65, 70%. But even if we went from 33.7% to 45%, right? Just a very modest jump. If we made just that jump alone, now when you go spend more money on marketing and advertising, now you're closing 45% of the leads that walk through the door. Your marketing dollar just became so much more efficient, and your ROI just substantially increased on each marketing dollar spent. So I often hear that I need to spend more money, get more leads, and that's the answer. When in reality, most of the time, that is not the first step answer.
I love that you said that. In your experience, when you go into law firms, and I want to correct something I said before when I said the 11 practice areas,
Yes,
over
yes.
50 firms that you've worked with already and growing. So Michael, how many of them really truly have a lead generation problem?
Not many. Not many. Most of them, especially by the time they get to us, are pretty good on their leads.
Yes. Yeah. And they keep thinking it because they're in these Facebook groups. I'm in this one Facebook group where this one attorney's like, let me show you how we're generating 150 leads a day. And everybody's like, how? I'm like, girl, there's no way you guys could even keep up with this. Like, what? You don't need more leads. You have to really streamline your sales structure, your sales process, and your closing process, right?
Right. And what's so funny about it is on the inverse, if someone like myself were to post in that group, no, let's actually convert 110 of those 150 leads, the message becomes much less attractive. And I don't know if it's because there's more work involved in getting the sales fixed, which I personally don't believe is true when you actually have structure in place. I think it's much easier to do that than go get more leads. But it's funny because I often see that the message gets diluted because everyone is so allured by the idea of more leads, because naturally we think more leads, more money, more business. When you have an opportunity sitting right in front of you, you could probably stop generating more additional leads today, fix your close rate, and you'd be happy as a clam if you saw what could change as a result of that.
I love that you even said that, like, let's talk about convert, because I think that word seems very scary for people because of a few things. Because now I need to start looking at data. Right. Now I'm under the microscope because I'm the one in the conference room. Not many people are measuring my effectiveness as the owner, as the attorney, or whoever it is. Some firms are that have non-attorney salespeople and things of that nature. But it opens like Pandora's box, because when I start working with firms, and by and large, I'm more interested in the front lines, the receptionist and things of that nature, to make sure they're getting the initial contact to even engage, but when we start looking at data, I think it overwhelms people because they might have to have hard conversations with the person who's answering the phone, or they're going to start to see how much money they're spending and we're missing calls, or we're missing leads, or we're not processing them to intake, or what have you. Or now it's going to be really clear that my closing rate's 33% and my name's on the building and everyone thinks I'm the rock star. And I think the ego like ego, number one, but number two, to your point, I think the part that makes their head explode is that they need to start looking at really, truly looking at their numbers. But,
Yep.
you know, I love a statement, the truth will set you free,
Mhm.
right? And, you know, whether you're looking at it and really getting clear with it, or you're sensing it and feeling it, you're still living in awareness hell somewhere. Like you're aware that there's no money in the bank, or there's not enough money in the bank. You're aware of, yeah, let's get 100 more leads right this week. But now I'm jam packed in the conference room, and now don't have time to eat, see my kids, go to the bathroom. Now everybody's treating me like a pack mule. I'm just boom, 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 doing initial consultations. And then at the end, I have no engagement agreements. Now I'm like, this doesn't work either.
Mhm. You're absolutely right. It's a frustrating process, and you're right. You've got to look at the data, and I understand it could be a humbling experience the first time you look at it. It really could be. But I love what you just said. The truth will set you free. It's absolutely right. If you want to grow your practice, you've got to have a grip on the numbers. You've got to know where they stand. It's just that simple.
Yes, I love Tony. I think it's Tony Robbins who always says that fear is a beautiful motivator. So you're looking at the numbers, you don't like them, but guess what? Now you have some gas in your tank to do something about it. The part where we get stuck is then we don't have a structure. We don't have a system. We don't know how. So then it becomes overwhelming and we do nothing. We shut down.
Yep.
Yeah. So I love that structure. I love that it's every single time black and white when it comes time for closing. And this would be exciting for me. I'm like, oh, no more customization. Thank you. Because the average attorney that I talk to is spending 90 minutes crafting an engagement agreement. I'm
Oh
like,
boy.
what?
Yeah, that's a bit ludicrous in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. So tell us, Michael, how people can learn more. And I think you have a free training that they truly can find some nuggets that they could implement by the end of your training, right?
Yeah, and I think as I lead into that, I think it's good to know where a firm loosely by practice area could and should be with their close rate. So if you don't mind, I'd love to just share that so that way
Please.
they don't have to imagine, am I at the right place, right?
Yes.
So here's what we find. Criminal and family law firms should consistently be closing between about 55 and 65%. Immigration should be consistently between about 60 and 70%. Bankruptcy should be consistently between about 65 and 75%. Estate planning and probate should be 70 to 80% plus. And then
Plus.
PI 95% plus. Obviously its own type of practice area. And that's what we find. And so look, if you're not at those numbers yet, that's okay. That means there's an opportunity on the table to make an impact really quickly to your cash flow, which is great. And yes, we do have a free gift. So if you go to theclosingroom.com/podcast, I created a quick 10-minute video, 5 minutes if you watch it on 2x speed, explaining a single shift that you can make in your sales process right now to instantly boost results.
Wow. I love those numbers. Thank you for breaking it down by practice area. Estate planning, you're right. By and large, that's the majority of my clients where I started out 26 years ago. And
Yeah.
I'm very passionate about estate planning and elder law. And that's a no-brainer. Nobody wakes up saying, oh my God, I have nothing to do today. Let's go talk about death and taxes.
Right. You're spot on. Yeah, those are the ranges. Of course, there's other practice areas that fall either in relation to some of those that sit in about the same range. I gave some of the broad high strokes of the most common practice areas we work with. But that's what firms that are in our program are consistently doing every week.
Oh my goodness. Okay. For those of you that are walking, jogging, listening while you're driving, what have you, the closing room or closing?
Yes, the closing room.
Theclosingroom.com
/podcast.
Great. I'm going to put it in the show notes. I'm put all of Michael's handles, LinkedIn and everything there. And I'm also going to put Richard James in there as well. If you all are not familiar with Richard James, I just have to put this shout out there because I'm super excited. After I met him, I'm going to come speak at your event in February in Arizona. And I love the theme, which is profit. So I'm so pumped about that. I'm so excited to figure out about the closing room and what you're doing. And I know you're up to some other big initiatives outside of just the closing room. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of exciting things happening over in this world. Yes.
Yes. So you definitely want to follow Michael. You want to follow the closing room. You want to absolutely positively watch the training and stay abreast because there's some amazing stuff coming down the pike in 2023 that I know these are things you all are struggling with: intake, secret shoppers, closing, all the things, staffing. I'm really, really excited about the work and the mission that you all are on and to have found you, because the struggle is real. I'm excited that in my experience, attorneys are getting more comfortable with using the word sales. It definitely wasn't like this 20 years ago. You couldn't use the word sales or marketing. They would be like, my bar association, like they would just go crazy.
Yeah, Zig Ziglar, if you don't mind, says it best.
Please.
When it comes to the word sales. Sales is not something we do to our clients. It's something we do for our clients. And the best way for me to summarize this is if you're listening to this and you feel that you are the best firm in your practice area, in your geographical region, I would go as far as to saying you've got an ethical obligation to get the prospect to retain your firm because you're the best firm to help them through the situation they're going through. And that's what Zig Ziglar is saying. So that takes the sliminess out of sales because it should never be that.
Yeah. And you better be saying you're the best in your marketplace, number one. And number two, I love that you say it's your ethical duty, because if not you, it's going to be someone else. And you all know the people that have come in with their little binder of whatever they did with the attorney before you. And now they're finally saying, I'm going to hire and pay the expert, and you want to cringe. You're just heartbroken at the legal advice that they're getting elsewhere. So stop them at the pass. And I'm just going to say this, and then I'll get off my soapbox. After they leave, guess what? They have three other attorneys they've teed up to talk to. So if you're letting them leave and think about it, they're going to see Joe down the street and Susie down the street, and maybe it's cheaper, and it's definitely not going to be the caliber of counseling that you provide them, client experience, customer service, and everything. And so you're doing them a massive, massive disservice if they're not hiring you, because we all have in your practice area the war stories, the horror stories that will break your soul. And you're like, oh my goodness, if you would have only come see me, I could have saved your family a lot of heartache financially and everything else.
Absolutely. I think that's very, very well put.
Yeah. Oh, Michael, I am so pumped. I'm not kidding you. You're coming into my class and you're going to teach, because my team needs you. My employees need you to have your back. I'll tell them, all right, just blame it on Michael and tell them, Michael told us we have to do this. It works, because what do attorneys want? Proof of concept. Their number one question is, well, who else has this work for? And we have it. We have it for you folks. So thank you. All right. I'm going to have all the links in the show notes. If you're listening to this, go to your favorite Spotify, go to the website, hiringandempowering.com, click on the podcast tab, and all the show notes will be there as well. Thank you, Michael, for being my guest today.
Molly, it was my honor. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone was able to derive some value from our conversation today. I think there was some real good nuggets throughout here.
Yes. And if you didn't, oh boy, you're in denial.
Something like that, right?
Yeah. All right. Until next time, folks, continue being legal leaders, leading legal leaders, and we'll see you next Tuesday. We've reached the end of another impactful conversation on the Hire and Empower podcast. Whether this was your first episode or you're a longtime listener, I know you can tell I have passion for people. Whether you're a business owner, employee, executive, or hiring manager, I understand the situation you're in. Hiring, onboarding, and leadership is expensive, exhausting, overwhelming, and if that's not enough, it's also time-consuming. My friends, it doesn't have to be this way. There is a team at H&E that has your back. For over 25 years, they've transformed over 4,000 law firms into efficient, effective, profitable assets for their business and made it fun to come to work again. Check out our Smart Hire solution, our employee leadership program, and the 66-day law firm turnaround at hiringandempowering.com. This episode is being sponsored by Legalese Marketing. Listen, law firms have many ebbs and flows, and we tend to see this typical pattern. When things around the office are slow, lawyers get better at following up. But when the bustle is back, they tend to drop the ball. What if you had a system in place that not only automated follow-ups, but could guide potential clients seamlessly through the intake process and beyond? The team at Legalese works with your firm to create a custom pipeline of emails, text messages, and follow-up calls sent to your leads when you want them to be sent. Whether it's a consultation confirmation email sent a minute after the request goes through, long-term nurture emails sent 6 months later, a request for Google reviews sent to the most opportune times, they put a system in place that improves your client experience while taking tasks off of your plate. Or maybe you're already rolling in a software or CRM, but it's not set up as you want. Or perhaps you know you could be maximizing your automations more. Sometimes it's hard to tell what you need without a deep dive into your account. That's where Legalese audits and analysis come in. First, their team will learn everything about your processes and how you intend them. Then they'll go through your automations and map out the needed changes. Lastly, you'll discuss a plan forward and how to make your optimized office a reality. Legalese team pushes the boundaries of what automation can do to help your firm operate in ways you think were possible. Don't let potential clients slip through the cracks by not following up with them. Schedule a consultation today with Legalese Marketing. They look forward to helping you create more time, consistency, and your KPIs. To learn more, go to legalesemarketing.com and book your free consultation call today.